The room was softly illuminated, the faint hum of a security scanner permeating the air. Barron Trump sat in silence, his sharp eyes scanning the opulent private lounge in a high-rise overlooking Washington, D.C. It was just days before his father, Donald Trump, would be inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States. Yet an unusual tension lingered, a sense that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The door creaked open, and in walked Hunter Biden. The meeting was unexpected, cloaked in secrecy, with guards sworn to silence ensuring its confidentiality. Hunter approached Barron slowly, his hands trembling slightly. His gaze carried a weight, something unspoken yet heavy with meaning. "I need to talk to you," Hunter whispered, his voice low but firm. The words sent a chill down Barron's spine. What could Hunter Biden possibly want to say to him, just days before his father's inauguration? Barron leaned forward cautiously, his heart racing. Hunter moved closer, whispering something so shocking that Barron's expression froze. The room seemed to close in, leaving a question hanging in the air. Barron struggled to process Hunter's words. The gravity of what he had just heard was overwhelming. For a moment, he thought he might have misheard. He blinked, staring into Hunter's eyes, searching for any hint of a joke or insincerity, but Hunter's face was dead serious. "I know it's hard to believe," Hunter said softly, his voice steady yet tinged with emotion. "But I needed to tell you. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer." Barron leaned back, his mind racing. "Why are you telling me this now? Why me?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and frustration. Hunter hesitated, glancing at the guards stationed at the door. Their stoic faces betrayed no reaction, but their presence was a constant reminder of the delicate nature of this meeting. "Because you're the only one who might understand," Hunter replied. "The only one who can help." Barron's chest tightened as those words echoed in his mind. The weight of responsibility suddenly felt crushing. Was he ready for this? Did he even have a choice? He stared at the city lights outside the window, his thoughts a tangled web of confusion and fear. He could still hear Hunter's whispered words replaying in his mind. It wasn't just what Hunter had said, it was how he'd said it, with desperation and urgency that was impossible to ignore. "Your father is more than just a leader," Hunter had said. "He's what this country needs. But there's something you need to know before he takes that oath." Barron clenched his fists. Why was Hunter confiding in him? Was this some political maneuver? But deep down, he knew there was more to it. Hunter's voice had trembled with a sincerity that couldn't be faked. Back at the Trump residence that night, Barron sat in his room, unable to sleep. His mind drifted to memories of his father, not as a political figure, but as the man who taught him how to play chess, who listened to his dreams, and who always said, "The truth is your greatest ally." No matter how hard it is to face, was Hunter telling the truth? And if so, what would Barron do with it? Barron's security detail had been on high alert ever since Hunter Biden requested the meeting. It was an unusual request, and the timing made it even stranger. Just 3 days remained until Donald Trump's inauguration, and tensions in Washington were at an all-time high. The meeting took place in a nondescript building in downtown D.C., the kind of place where power plays were made in whispers and handshakes. Barron, tall and composed, walked into the room with his special guards flanking him. The 17-year-old had grown accustomed to the weight of scrutiny, but this encounter was different. Hunter was already seated, his face pale and drawn. He stood as Barron entered, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. Barron didn't sit immediately. "You said it was urgent. What's this about?" His voice carried a maturity that belied his age. Hunter motioned for Barron to sit. As soon as he did, Hunter leaned in and whispered words that made Barron freeze. His eyes widened. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Hunter nodded, his expression grim, dead serious. As the SUV sped through the streets of D.C., Barron sat silently in the back seat. His guards were discreet, keeping their eyes ahead, but even they couldn't ignore the tension in the air. Barron replayed Hunter's words over and over in his head. It wasn't just what Hunter had revealed, it was the way he had said it, like a man unburdening himself of a secret that had eaten away at his soul. "He needs to know the truth," Hunter had said. "If he doesn't, it could destroy everything." The young Trump struggled to make sense of it all. Why would Hunter Biden, of all people, come to him with something this explosive? And what did it mean for his father, who was just days away from taking the oath of office? Back at the Trump residence, Barron slipped into his room, closing the door quietly behind him. He sat at his desk, staring at a framed photo of his family. His father's familiar smile seemed to offer reassurance, but it wasn't enough. For the first time in his life, Barron felt the crushing weight of a secret too big to bear. The next morning, Barron joined his family for breakfast in the grand dining room. The conversation was light, filled with talk of inauguration plans and speeches, but Barron could barely focus. Hunter's words loomed large in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was at stake. Donald Trump noticed his son's silence. "Barron, you've been awfully quiet," he said, setting down his coffee cup. Barron forced a smile. "Just thinking about everything, Dad. It's a big day coming up." His father nodded, his expression softening. "It is. But you've always handled these moments with grace. You're wise beyond your years." Those words hit Barron like a punch to the gut. Wise beyond his years? How could he live up to that when he was holding on to something that could change everything? As his father spoke about the importance of leadership and legacy, Barron realized he couldn't keep this to himself much longer. The burden was too heavy, and time was running out. He had to make a decision, and whatever he chose, it would shape not just his future, but the future of the entire nation. Barron paced his room, his mind in turmoil. Hunter's words echoed endlessly in his head. "You're the only one who can help him make the right choice. Tell him, Barron. Tell him before it's too late." Barron clenched his fists. How could Hunter expect him to carry this weight? He was just a teenager. Even if he had grown up in the public eye, this wasn't the kind of responsibility he was prepared for. A knock on his door startled him. It was Mason, the head of his security detail. "Everything all right, sir?" Mason's voice was calm but tinged with concern. Barron nodded. "Just thinking." Mason paused, as if sensing something deeper. "Sometimes talking about it helps," he said before stepping back into the hallway. Barron sat on his bed, staring at his phone. He could call Hunter and demand more answers. But would it change anything? The secret was already out. And now it was up to him to decide what to do. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Barron made a decision. He had to confront his father. But how could he explain, without betraying the trust Hunter had placed in him? Barron tiptoed down the grand staircase, his footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. He found his father in the study, reading through his inauguration speech. Donald Trump looked up, surprised to see his youngest son at such a late hour. "Barron, what's on your mind?" he asked, setting his papers aside. Barron hesitated, his heart pounding. "Dad, I need to talk to you. It's important." Donald gestured for him to sit. "Of course. What is it?" Barron took a deep breath, carefully choosing his words. "Someone told me something today. Something about you and the future of this country." His father's expression darkened slightly. "Who? And what did they say?" Barron shook his head. "I can't tell you who. But they said you need to make a choice, yeah. Choice that could change everything." For a moment, silence filled the room. Donald Trump leaned forward, his face unreadable. "Barron, you've always been wise beyond your years. If someone told you something important, you should tell me." But Barron couldn't bring himself to say it. "I need more time to figure it out," he whispered. His father nodded, though his eyes showed concern. "When you're ready, I'll listen." The next day, Barron received a message from Hunter. "Meet me tonight. Same place." Barron didn't want to go, but he knew he had to. His guards escorted him to the secure location, their faces stoic as ever. Inside, Hunter was waiting, pacing nervously. "You're here," Hunter said, relief washing over him. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Barron crossed his arms. "I don't know if I can do this, Hunter. My dad trusts me, and I don't know how to tell him without breaking that trust." Hunter stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "This isn't about you or me. It's about him, about what he's capable of. Barron, your father has the potential to unite this country in a way no one else can. But he needs to hear the truth before he steps into that role." Barron's throat tightened. "What truth?" Hunter leaned in and whispered, his voice barely audible. Barron's eyes filled with tears. "You really believe that?" Hunter nodded. "I've seen it, but it has to come from you. He'll listen to you, Barron. Barron swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'll think about it," he said, his voice trembling. As he walked back to the car, Barron wiped his face, determined to find the courage he needed. Barron couldn't sleep. The weight of Hunter's words lingered like a shadow in his mind. He stared out of his bedroom window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The inauguration was only 2 days away, and time was slipping through his fingers. He replayed Hunter's whispered revelation again and again. Your father's greatest strength is his ability to inspire hope. But his weakness lies in forgetting the pain of others. He must remember what unites, not divides. The words were simple, but their meaning was profound. Hunter wasn't just talking about politics, was talking about healing. Barron wanted to believe in his father's ability to lead, but Hunter's plea had sown a seed of doubt. What if his father wasn't ready? What if he couldn't bridge the divide? That night, Barron wrote a letter. He didn't know if he would ever give it to his father, but he poured his heart into it. Every word carried the weight of a son's love, hope, and fear. As the sun began to rise, Barron folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. He wasn't ready to share it yet. The following evening, Barron received another message from Hunter. "We need to meet again. It's urgent." Barron hesitated. His security team was already uneasy about the previous encounters, but something told him this was important. He agreed, and within the hour, he was back in the discreet meeting place. Hunter was waiting, his face more drawn than before. He looked like a man running out of time. "I didn't tell you everything the first time," Hunter admitted. "I didn't think you could handle it. But you need to know." Barron leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What is it?" Hunter took a deep breath. "Your father's decisions in the next few days will shape the future of this country for generations. If he lets pride cloud his judgment, it could tear the nation apart. But if he leads with empathy, he could bring a divided people back together." Barron's chest tightened. "Why are you telling me this? You're supposed to be on the other side." Hunter gave a sad smile. "Because I've seen what happens when people don't listen. And I've seen the good your father can do if he listens to his heart and to you." As Barron left the meeting, a single tear rolled down his cheek. The weight of the future had never felt heavier. The Trump family gathered for dinner the night before the inauguration. The atmosphere was celebratory, filled with laughter and anticipation. But Barron was quiet, lost in thought. His father noticed. "Barron, you've been awfully quiet lately. Something on your mind?" Barron hesitated. This was his moment. He could stay silent, or he could share what he had learned. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling. "Dad," he began, his voice steady, despite the storm in his chest. "I've been thinking a lot about what makes a great leader. It's not just strength or confidence. It's the ability to understand people, to connect with them, and to lead with compassion." Donald Trump studied his son, his expression softening. "Go on." Barron's heart raced. "I believe in you, Dad. I know you can do this. But I also know how much this country needs healing. If you lead with your heart, you can be the president who brings us all together." The room fell silent. Donald Trump reached across the table, placing a hand on his son's. "Thank you, Barron. Your words mean more to me than you know." Barron nodded, tears in his eyes. For the first time, he felt like he had done the right thing. As the family retired for the evening, Barron returned to his room, his heart heavy with the weight of the conversation. He opened the drawer where he had tucked the letter he had written days earlier. Unfolding the paper, he reread the words he had poured out, unsure if he had captured everything he wanted to say. Barron's fingers trembled as he reached for a pen and added a final line. "Lead with love, Dad. The world needs it now more than ever." Slipping the letter into an envelope, Barron quietly made his way to his father's study. The security guard stationed nearby nodded at him, but didn't question his presence. He placed the letter on his father's desk, positioning it where it couldn't be missed. As he turned to leave, he paused, glancing at the framed photos lining the walls. Each one told a story of triumph, struggle, and moments shared as a family. "Please understand what I'm trying to say," Barron whispered to himself, his voice breaking. The next morning would be pivotal. His letter held truths that only a son could share. But whether those truths would be heard was a question Barron couldn't answer. Morning came quickly. Barron was seated at the breakfast table, his stomach too twisted with nerves to eat. Donald Trump entered the room, the envelope in his hand. His expression was unreadable as he approached his son. "Barron," he said, his voice unusually soft. "I found your letter." Barron looked down, bracing himself for his father's reaction. Donald sat across from him, unfolding the letter. This is not something I expected from you, but it's something I needed to hear." Barron's eyes welled with tears. "I just wanted to say what was in my heart. I believe in you, Dad. I know you can do great things. But I also know how much people are hurting. If anyone can bring them together, it's you." Donald reached across the table, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "You've given me a lot to think about, Barron, and I'm proud of you for your courage, for your honesty." In that moment, Barron saw a side of his father that few ever did a man, not just of power, but of reflection and vulnerability. The bond between them had deepened, and for the first time, Barron felt like his voice truly mattered. Later that day, Barron's security team received an unexpected call. Hunter Biden wanted one last meeting before the inauguration. Barron agreed, but insisted it take place somewhere secure. The meeting was arranged at a private lounge within a heavily guarded hotel. The room was silent as Barron entered, his guards stationed strategically outside. Hunter stood, his face etched with worry. "Barron, I know this is my last chance to talk to you. I had to see you again." Barron crossed his arms, his expression cautious. "What is it this time, Hunter? What more can you possibly say?" Hunter sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wanted to tell you. I believe in him too. Your father. But only if he remembers who he is at his career, man who can inspire, who can lead with both strength and compassion." Barron blinked, taken aback by the raw sincerity in Hunter's voice. "You really think he can do it?" Hunter nodded. "I do. But it starts with you, Barron. You're his anchor. Don't let him forget what you've written in that letter." The weight of Hunter's words settled heavily on Barron. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about hope for a nation. The secure lounge was eerily silent as Barron and Hunter sat across from each other. The air between them felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. Barron leaned forward slightly, his voice barely audible. "Hunter, you said you believe in him. Why? After everything, why now?" Hunter exhaled deeply, his expression heavy with unspoken truths. "Because I've seen what happens when someone lets bitterness and division win. I've lived it, Barron." He paused, looking directly into the young man's eyes. "Your father has a gifted chance to heal this country, but only if he listens to people like you." Barron's breath hitched. "Me? I'm just his son. He's the one with all the power." Hunter shook his head, leaning closer. "That's where you're wrong. Sometimes the most powerful voice is the one closest to the heart." His voice dropped to a whisper, the words almost too quiet to hear. "Tell him what we both know, Barron. Remind him that strength isn't just about winning, it's about leading with grace and courage. You're the bridge he needs." Barron's chest tightened. The weight of Hunter's words left him speechless. That night, Barron couldn't sleep. Hunter's words played over and over in his